Like, honestly, I am not a techie person. Like, and she definitely is. And so she does like this as well.
It really has. Yeah, very freeing. Not in a way that I was stuck, but just like I'm just...
Penny of that equity, every cent she had spent years building, went straight into buying Robyn Brown's Flagstaff mansion. And for years before that moment, she had signed something promising she would never, ever say that out loud. That is not a rumor. That is not a fan theory. That came out of Meri's own mouth. And once you understand the full timeline of how that happened, you will never watch Sister Wives the same way again. If this kind of deep dive is what you came here for, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the SW Daily, because we go places the show was never brave enough to go. Now let's get into it. To understand what happened to Meri Brown's money, you have to understand what Meri Brown was supposed to be. When Sister Wives premiered on TLC in 2010, the story was clear. Kody Brown had 4 wives, and wife number 1, Meri, was the original, the legal wife, the woman who had been there from the very beginning, who had built a life with this man before any camera crew showed up, before any production deal was signed, before the world knew what a sister wife even was. She was the matriarch. That was the word the show used constantly. The matriarch of a plural family, the foundation. The way TLC framed it, the Brown family was this radical, modern experiment in love and commitment. 4 women, 1 man, 17 kids, and a belief system that said the more people who loved each other, the stronger the family became. And viewers bought into it, millions of them, because on the surface, it looked functional. It looked like something that could work if everyone was truly equal, truly respected, and truly treated as a partner. But equality was never actually on the table, and Meri's story proves it. Let's go back to 2010, because this is where the first crack appeared, even though most viewers didn't recognize it as a crack at the time. Robyn Sullivan, soon to be Robyn Brown, joined the family as the 4th wife. She came in with 3 children from a previous marriage, and almost immediately there was a shift in the air that the cameras caught, but nobody fully named at the time. Kody was different around Robyn, softer, more attentive, the kind of present that he clearly wasn't offering to the other 3 women in the same measure. The show tried to frame this as a natural adjustment period, a new member joining a complex family. Of course there would be growing pains. Of course the dynamic would shift temporarily. But what viewers were watching, though they didn't know it yet, was not a temporary adjustment. It was a permanent realignment. Kody Brown had made his choice. The rest of the next 14 years of television was essentially the slow motion documentation of that choice playing out, and who paid for it. Now, the first major public move that revealed where Kody's loyalty actually lived was the legal divorce from Meri. This happened in 2014. The official explanation given, both on the show and to the press, was purely procedural. Kody needed to legally divorce Meri so he could legally marry Robyn and adopt her 3 children from her previous relationship. That way, Robyn's kids would have his last name, his legal protections, his inheritance rights. It was framed as a practical, even generous decision. Look at how much Kody cares about children who aren't biologically his. Look at this family doing the hard thing for the right reasons. And Meri agreed to it. On camera, she smiled. She talked about it being an act of love. She spiritually recommitted to Kody in a ceremony that had no legal standing whatsoever, because legally, from that point forward, she was a single woman, not a wife, not even a domestic partner under the law. A legally single woman who had agreed to remain in a marriage that now existed only in her own mind and in a TV contract. Think about what that actually means. Meri Brown, wife number 1, the original legal wife, voluntarily surrendered her legal status in this marriage so that Robyn's children could be adopted. And in exchange, she received what exactly? a spiritual ceremony, a symbolic ring exchange, and the privilege of continuing to participate in a family structure where she had just formally handed over the only legal protection she had. That is not a paperwork issue. That is a power transfer. And it happened right there on television in front of millions of people, wrapped in enough emotional language that most viewers cried instead of asking the harder question: what does Meri get out of this deal? The answer, it turned out, was less and less with each passing year. Let's talk about the money, because that's really what this story is. After Robyn joined the family, a very clear pattern began to emerge in every major financial decision the Browns made. The Las Vegas move, the Flagstaff move, the property purchases, the lot distributions. If you track the money, the math always points in one direction, and that direction was not toward Meri. When the family decided to move from Utah to Las Vegas, all 4 wives had to uproot their lives, sell or leave their homes, and start over in a new state with no established community, no extended support network, and no guarantee of financial stability. The move was, by most accounts, extremely difficult on all 4 women. But it was Meri who had built particularly deep roots, a home she loved, a life she had constructed. And she made the move because that was what you did in a plural family when a decision was made collectively. You moved. Then came Flagstaff. The family decided to leave Las Vegas and relocate to Flagstaff, Arizona. Again, all 4 wives were expected to pick up and follow. And again, Meri did. She sold her Las Vegas home. And here is where the story gets specific in a way that matters. The equity Meri walked away from that sale, the money she had built up in that property, did not go toward building Meri a new life in Flagstaff. It did not go toward a down payment on Meri's new home. It did not go into a joint family account where everyone benefited equally. It went to Robyn's house. Meri has now confirmed this herself. Every dollar. The entire proceeds from the sale of her Las Vegas home funded Robyn Brown's Flagstaff mansion. And before that information became public knowledge, Meri had signed an agreement, her words, consenting to never discuss it. Let that sit for a moment. There is a silent agreement inside a marriage about where one wife's money went after she sold her home. That is not a family. That is not an equal partnership. That is a financial arrangement where one person's assets were liquidated and redirected, and then legally muzzled to protect someone else's comfort. And the someone else who got comfortable was Robyn, the woman who joined last, the woman who Kody had already quietly chosen above everyone else. While Meri signed a non-disclosure about her own money, Robyn got the mansion. Now, some people watching this might wonder, did the other wives know? Did Janelle know? Did Christine know? And the honest answer is that the full picture of who knew what and when is still not completely clear. What is clear is that Christine Brown, the 3rd wife, eventually walked away from the family in 2021. She moved back to Utah, rebuilt her life, found genuine happiness, and has been pretty transparent about the fact that the financial dynamics in the family were deeply unfair. She doesn't use Meri's specific language, but Christine has made no secret of the fact that the money never flowed equally, and that Robyn's household was consistently prioritized over everyone else's. Janelle Brown also eventually separated from Kody, though her departure has been characteristically quieter and more measured. Janelle was always the pragmatic one, the one who worked corporate jobs and kept spreadsheets and approached this marriage like a project manager. Even she couldn't make the numbers work in a family where the numbers were never designed to be fair. But Christine and Janelle at least got out with some clarity about why they left. Meri's situation was different, more complicated. More painful, honestly, when you look at the full timeline, because here is what makes Meri's story genuinely devastating. She didn't leave after the money. She stayed for years. She had already funded Robyn's house. She had already surrendered her legal marriage status. She had already watched Kody's attention, affection, and priority go somewhere else on a permanent basis. And she stayed. The catfishing scandal broke in 2012, just 2 years after Robyn joined the family. Meri was emotionally involved in an online relationship with someone who turned out to be a woman pretending to be a man. The details of that scandal were broadcast across the show and across tabloid media. Kody was cold about it, dismissive. Rather than treating it as a symptom of a woman who was emotionally neglected inside her own marriage, it became another weight Meri carried. Another thing she had to apologize for. Another reason the audience sometimes looked at her with more suspicion than sympathy. But here is the reframe that context demands. When a woman who has been legally unmarried for 2 years, whose husband's emotional and physical attention has clearly moved elsewhere, whose money has been redirected to benefit another woman, when that woman falls into an emotionally manipulative online connection, that is not a character flaw. That is a person reaching for something that feels like being chosen, something that feels like being wanted, and she found a predator instead. And then she had to grieve that publicly while remaining inside the very marriage that created the void in the first place. And she stayed. She doubled down. She kept showing up to the collective events and the family meetings and the camera confessionals and the reunions. She kept saying she was committed. She kept wearing the spiritual marriage ring that had no legal meaning. She kept being Meri Brown, wife number one, even when wife number one had become, in every practical sense, a title without any of the accompanying reality. She funded a marriage she was already losing with her own money under a silence agreement. The Coyote Pass land situation made it even more pointed. When the family purchased land in Flagstaff to eventually build individual homes for each wife, the lot distribution was not equal. And Meri, despite contributing more money to the land purchase than at least some of the other wives, ended up with a smaller or less favorable arrangement. The family never actually built on the Coyote Pass land during their time together. It became another symbol of promises that never materialized. Another chapter in the story of Meri putting in and not getting out. You might be asking by this point, why? Why did she stay? And it's a fair question, but it's also a question that reflects how little most of us understand about the psychology of these kinds of situations. Meri had built her entire identity around this family. Her faith, her sense of purpose, her social world, her public persona, all of it was tied to being a Brown wife. Walking away didn't just mean leaving a bad marriage. It meant dismantling who she understood herself to be. It meant publicly admitting that 24 years of her life had been built on a foundation that was crumbling. And there was the religion. The faith tradition that underpinned the plural marriage was not casual. It was not a lifestyle choice like picking a favorite yoga studio. For Meri, the belief that this marriage structure had spiritual significance was deeply real. Leaving didn't just feel like a personal failure. For a long time, it likely felt like a spiritual one. So she stayed. She advocated for herself in whatever small ways she could. She tried to get Kody's attention. The show documented some of those attempts, conversations where she expressed how disconnected she felt, where she asked for more time together, where she was visibly hurt by his absence. And Kody's responses on camera ranged from distracted to openly annoyed. In later seasons, he didn't even try to disguise where his preference lay. He made it pretty clear that his relationship with Meri was something he had emotionally checked checked out of, while Robyn's household remained his primary focus and his primary home. Meanwhile, Robyn was living in the house that Meri's money had helped purchase. Let that geography sink in. Meri is trying to repair a marriage from the outside. Kody is consistently inside Robyn's home. And the foundation of that home was partially built with Meri's equity. There is a specific kind of injustice in that image that goes beyond infidelity or preference or even cruelty. It is financial exploitation dressed in the language of family and love and spiritual commitment. And it worked for years because Meri believed in the framework. She believed that the sacrifices she was making were meaningful, that they would be reciprocated eventually, that the family would circle back to her once things settled. Things never settled. 2023 was the year it finally became undeniable. Meri publicly announced the end of her relationship with Kody. Not a divorce, technically, because there was no legal marriage to dissolve, just a statement that they were done. And the way she talked about it was notable. Not raw grief exactly, something more like exhaustion finally giving way to relief. The way someone sounds when they have been holding something impossible heavy for a very long time, and they finally put it down. Fans who had followed the show were not entirely surprised. By that point, the writing had been on the wall for multiple seasons. But what most fans still didn't have was the full financial picture. They knew the emotional story. They didn't know the money story. They didn't know about the Las Vegas house proceeds. They didn't know about the silence agreement. They knew Meri was hurting. They didn't know exactly what she had given up to fund the life of the woman who replaced her. That didn't come until January 2026. And when it came in Meri's own words, with that specific, deliberate phrasing that only someone telling the truth after a very long silence uses. She said this was something she had consented to never talk about. And then she talked about it anyway. Because the agreement, whatever it was and whoever held it, clearly no longer had the power over her that it once did. Or she decided that her story mattered more than the terms of someone else's financial protection. Either way, she talked. And the picture that emerged was the one this video has been laying out. Here is what we actually know. We know that Meri sold her Las Vegas home and that the proceeds went to Robyn's Flagstaff property. We know Meri signed something agreeing not to discuss this. We know that the financial pattern across the entire Flagstaff era consistently disadvantaged Meri compared to Robyn. We know that Meri's legal status in the marriage was surrendered for Robyn's benefit years before any of this came to light. And we know that Meri stayed through all of it and doubled down financially and emotionally for the better part of a decade after the damage was already done. What we don't know, what probably only Kody, Robyn, and whatever accountants and lawyers were involved actually know, is the full scope of the financial arrangement. Whether there were other transfers, whether there were other agreements, whether the Coyote Pass situation was as lopsided as it appeared. Those pieces may still be missing. But what Meri gave us in January 2026 was enough to recontextualize everything. Every season of Sister Wives where Meri seemed defensive or needy or difficult or emotionally unstable, all of it looks different now because she was not a woman who couldn't handle a plural marriage. She was a woman being systematically marginalized inside one, financially and emotionally, while being contractually prevented from saying so. The matriarch became the bank, and when the bank is no longer useful, it doesn't get to stay in the house. So where is Meri Brown now? Genuinely better. That matters to say because this story could end in a completely different place, and it doesn't. Meri runs her own bed and breakfast properties, Lizzie's Heritage Inn in Parowan, Utah, and a second location. And by most accounts, she has turned them into thriving businesses. She is publicly dating again, something that would have been unthinkable for most of the years she was still invested in the Brown family. She is posting on social media with an energy that looks, honestly, like someone who finally got their life back. She did not walk away destroyed. She walked away lighter. But the lesson she represents is genuinely important, not just for fans of a reality TV show, but for anyone who has ever stayed too long in something because they believed the framework more than the evidence, because they had invested so much that leaving felt like admitting the investment was wrong, because the identity they had built around a relationship felt impossible to separate from who they were as a person. Meri Brown stayed for years past the point where the evidence was clear. She funded someone else's life. She signed a document protecting that arrangement. She absorbed the public scrutiny and the fan judgment and the catfishing fallout and the cold shoulder from a man who had already made his choice. And she did all of that because she believed deeply, sincerely, in something that was not actually being offered to her in return. When the person you are committed to asks you to sign something that prevents you from discussing where your own money went inside your own marriage, that is not a family protecting itself. That is a secret that someone needs kept. And secrets in marriages, especially financial ones, are almost never there to protect the person being silenced. Meri's not bitter. Watch her now and you will see that clearly. She is a woman on the other side of something hard, who has built something real with her own hands, on her own terms, with her own name on the deed. No silence agreements, no equity being redirected, just her work, her business, her life. But she is also, whether she intends to be or not, a very specific kind of warning about what it looks like when love is used as a justification for extraction, about what happens when the language of family and faith and shared sacrifice gets weaponized to keep someone compliant while their resources flow somewhere else. About how long a person can stay in that situation when they genuinely believe the story they've been told about who they are to the person telling it. Meri believed she was the matriarch. She was the bank. And the bank found out the difference in January 2026 when she finally looked at the camera and said the thing she had agreed to never say. That is the real Sister Wives story. Not the road trips and the coordinated outfits and the Thanksgiving tables with too many people around them. This, the money, the silence, the woman who funded the mansion she was never going to live in and stayed a decade past the moment she should have left, and then walked out with her dignity intact and her own businesses thriving. If you made it to the end of this video, drop a comment below telling me what part of this story hit hardest for you, because I have a feeling this one is going to start some conversations. Subscribe to the SW Daily if you are not already here, because we are just getting started on this family story, and there is a lot more to unpack. Tap the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next, and share this one, because this is the version of Meri's story that deserves to be heard.